Good morning. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, hijacking completely the show this morning until Katrina gets here. But I'm joined by the lovely Danielle Evans from
Gateway Appraisal Services.
So we're going to be talking about in this show where the market's headed, where it's been, where we think it might be heading in the future. I'm very excited about that. We're going to pull out our little glass ball. We're going to practice our little voodoo, roll some chicken bones, and we're going to tell you where this crazy Florida market's going. I have some exciting news for you. There was this tower. I learned about this. It is a $250 million tower that was built in the early 2000s in St. Louis.
Okay.
Guess how much it just sold for?
$6 million. I don't know.
You're close.
$16 million?
You're close. $3.4 million.
Ugh.
It was the second largest commercial real estate property in the United States, 44 towers of commercialness. It was in the middle of a dead economic zone. This $250 million building, 2006, $250 million building in St. Louis sold for $3.4 million. That was a decrease from $140 a square foot to $2.50 a square foot.
Ooh.
So as hot as we think our real estate market is in Florida, it comes at the price. And that price that it comes with are other markets. But I just learned that yesterday, and I was astounded. I mean, between all the hybrid work from homes, all the companies that have gone remote, all the companies that have left the state of Illinois, it was just insane that building would sell for $140 a square foot built to $2.50 a square foot just sold. And they don't even know what they want to do with the building. They're thinking hotel. They're thinking they might demolish it. It's just insane.
That is insane.
I mean, what do you think your operating costs to maintain a building like that are? 44 stories.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I'm sure that it's well over what the building's going to cost.
Was that a hedge fund that bought it? I missed that. Good morning.
I'll have to look up who bought it. But yes, it was a little insane, this building. And I'll find out some more information as Katrina starts to run through these exciting numbers because we're on fire right now. This is the first time we've had new listings this high, and I can't remember how long.
Oh, we do. Spring has sprung. Look at that. Yeah, so our number of this is high, Leo. I don't know when it's been this high. I'm going to have to look back to last year. It's been a minute. The number of new listings in the market, 1,012 for a 7-day trend, single-family homes in 3 counties. So Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough. Price increases 143. Have to laugh at that one. The number of price decreases coming in at 1,308. And the number of solds, 667. That is a little shift like we have not seen in a minute.
Is it a lower shift or a higher shift?
To have this many new listings compared to this many sold.
I know that's a shift. That's some inventory.
667 sold, and there's 1,012 that came on the market in 7 days. Pending is at a sharp 997, but as we know, those don't all make it to the finish line. And then, of course, we talk about temporary off the market, right? Like that suspension status in MLS, 56 of those, and there's 32 that were withdrawn and 139 that were canceled by the seller. So interesting trends here.
Yeah, speaking of the trends, it was a Goldman Group that bought, and it was the AT&T office tower. That was the building, the AT&T office tower, and it was the Goldman Group that bought it.
Oh, see, I knew it. Hedge fund.
Yeah, and they're thinking about turning it into 306 apartments, 300 hotel rooms, and 37,000 square feet of retail.
Wow.
That's what they're thinking about doing with it. But yeah, I mean, just for all the excitement we have here in Florida, our exciting real estate market that's exploding, 1,042 new listings.
No, 1,012.
1,012 with pendings less than that, with solds half of that. We got inventory rolling in. We've got options.
Tampa's number one for millennials to buy here. I keep seeing these reports.
Where can millennials buy anywhere?
Over and over again. Well, this is where
I'll tell you, go right on up to Spring Hill, and any millennial can afford to buy a brand new construction.
You saw Citrus.
Citrus County is on fire.
They were $300,000 for new construction.
You don't even want to ask about Sumter County and Lake County.
Where all the old people go for mobile homes?
It's not anymore.
Is
it's
it
all brand new construction? And it's, the Villages is going to expand across another county soon.
Wow.
Pineapples for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? This will be a little bit of a show that
we love the color purple. Is that the elephant in the room? I see
I can't wait to hear Leo's opinion.
Speaking of which, did you know that elephants are good at hiding in trees?
I would imagine they're pretty big. What's the punchline?
I thought they knock them over to
They're
eat
pretty
them.
big.
Well, no, you haven't noticed that they're good in hiding in trees because they're that good at it.
Oh, God.
I can't imagine seeing an elephant in a tree. I'm just saying. All right, so good joke, but I think I ruined it for you.
No, yeah, I mean, I get difficulty sometimes trying to do the dad joke that need a setup of you to actually question, like, no, I haven't, or stuff like that. I can't feed you the line to say.
I'm always looking and waiting for the punchline.
Yeah, so you like simpler jokes. Like, did you hear about the snake on the construction site?
No.
It's a boa contractor.
Oh, that's sharp. I love it.
You like those quick dad jokes.
I do like those. Yes. I do.
That is too funny.
All right, so the elephant in the room, right? My listeners, and the cool thing I like about you guys, and I know there may or may not be a ton of you. That's debatable, right? Based on who you listen to.
35,000 to 45,000 listeners,
but
according
do they all
to the Nielsen's.
chime in right at 9 o'clock on Friday? I don't know.
They do. They want the market update.
So the ones that I connect with, those of you that are ready to sell your home, and you call me, and we connect, and I walk you through this process to hold your hand and tell you how to do it and what to expect and how to maximize your equity so you can walk away with the most amount of cash in your pocket. I do that all the time. I'm a real person. I show up. I get that. People are surprised often that I'm still, unlike Leo, he's out of the field pretty much for inspections unless it's big stuff. I'm still on listing appointments anyway. I don't work so much with buyers anymore, but I definitely work with sellers and listing appointments, and they're very surprised when I come. And then the last one told me, "Oh, I thought you were younger." That's what she told me.
Oh, no.
I was like, is that, like, do I look old or does my voice sound young? Like, what?
Well, you have like 45 million years of experience.
Yeah, I know.
I used to get, oh, you're so young. Now I get, oh, you're a woman.
Yeah, well.
It is what it is.
So if you're thinking about selling and you want some information, I'm going to give out our off-air number a couple times during the hour.
813-377-2775. That's 813-377-2775. Text the word aged beauty.
Or maybe Leo. Well, he's sharp
Text
today.
the word aged beauty.
Sharp as a tack, man. If I had one.
813-377-2775.
If I had a tack, I would, like, poke it in his booty behind me, right
you
next to me.
You have tacks. What do you think's keeping this beautiful banner up?
Let me climb up there during the break. All right. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. So the NAR commission lawsuits.
Oh, my God. I'm excited to watch
I know
these.
you were waiting for me to just dive into this, right?
No, I'm not a lawyer, and we don't have a lawyer on the show.
I don't care.
So.
You know I'm going to talk about it from
Yeah.
a real estate perspective, right?
Lobbying.
All right. So here's the thing. The media has a way of spinning stuff, right?
Of course.
Oh,
And
of course.
I mean, we're media, but I don't consider ourselves mainstream media, like the publicly traded companies.
So are we like right-winged media? Are we left-winged media?
We're full our own opinion media.
Right. We're paid for our own opinion media, right? That's a fair way to say it. And so
I'm dad joke media.
You are.
You are.
So with that being said, when you look at most of these major news outlets, most of them are owned by BlackRock, right? We're one of the sister companies. They just are. And they control what goes out there. And so it's interesting if you look at this and you dive in, and I follow some people that look into this stuff pretty deeply, which are very much trusted resources. And one of the interesting things about this commission lawsuits is a certain company that, a very wealthy individual has an ownership interest in, so does BlackRock. And it's interesting that they weren't named in these commission lawsuits, right? I'm just saying. Some people might say it's a conspiracy. I don't think so.
I think you're just confusing. You've confused me, so I can only imagine what's happening with the listeners. You can't mention names?
There is I'd rather not. I think it probably doesn't make sense for me to do that. There's a big brokerage that was not included in the commission lawsuits. Okay. And there's a big one, right, that started out of Kansas City, and there's all the little baby spawns that have popped up all over the country.
Let's see which one started in Kansas City.
Okay. So with that being said, okay, this particular brokerage was not included in that suit. And I think the reason why is a lot of these lawsuits are sort of pushed by somewhere in the BlackRock, I think, is connected to it, right? Because their big thing is you'll have nothing, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. So we've already talked about these reports that by 2035, the percentage of investors that are going to own all the real estate is high. It's really high. It's like close to 50%.
There's entire planned developments. The entire planned development, imagine 130 homes.
Yeah.
None of them are owned.
None of them are available.
They're owned by a corporation. They are rented out, and they have a lease back option. So they don't sign the contract to buy it for 3 years. They have to rent it for 3 years before ever having the option to buy it. That's bankrolling. Yeah. And then they're the bank. The company that owns the development, they are now the lender. Mm-hmm. They're just raking it in.
And BlackRock has a hand in.
Oh, absolutely.
You
can
research it and read on it. They do.
And it's also insane. If you look at a true amortization schedule, and this is why I never recommend refinancing, is your first payment is 99% interest and first 1% principal. And then that goes down. So you have to think that if you have a $200,000 mortgage, you can pay like $50,000, $60,000 in interest over the life of that. So you're actually losing a lot of money when you don't pay down your mortgage faster.
So I'm going to chime in on that because they're in the AM schedules. There's simple interest and there's fully amortized. The fully amortized loans are that 1% you're talking about. The simple interest are not. So and that's most of what we see now is simple interest. When I started in the business, it was not. It was all what you're talking about. Not ARMs.
No, amortization.
But the way it's amortized, they were fully amortized, not simple interest. The difference is if you make a chunk down onto principal, you're going to see that significantly change the numbers in terms of what you pay in interest. Yes, a lot of it's front loaded and more of it is at the beginning. But if you look at a true refinance, and you say you're going to a lower rate, maybe even taking a year or two off, you could have the same payment and significantly have a difference towards principal. So that's the difference in the simple interest, which are much, much better than the fully amortized ones. But yes, you should be looking at that if you're refinancing.
So how hard is it to get I guess we need, as a Sarah question, but how hard is it to get a simple interest refi on an amortized schedule?
Almost all of them are simple interest now.
Oh, so we've gone away from the amortization.
No, that's all still amortized. It's just the schedule. The amortization is the schedule they follow. But simple interest means, like, if you pay a chunk down on that loan,
your interest
does it automatically re-amortize to where you would throw that AM schedule off that they printed for you, and now you're paying more towards principal, and like your payment's the same, right? But you made a chunk down, so that's the difference. And it's but yeah, a lot of the interest is up front. You're definitely going to pay the bulk of it in the beginning. So the commission lawsuit. So let's talk about this. And it's still, this is not definite. Nothing is done. There's a lot of talks on how people think things are going to go. And there's also the public perception, and there's, what real estate people think is perception and the way the mainstream media is spinning it. So we'll talk about all of those things. But the basis behind the lawsuit is, a group of individuals, whoever they are, got together and basically decided that they were going to sue the real estate brokerage for price fixing, essentially, violating antitrust laws, got the DOJ involved. Like, it's been a whole thing to where the DOJ is literally chiming in, and they're part of this ruling. And a lot of the companies have already settled, like RE/MAX settled early, Keller Williams settled early, even though the lawsuits weren't fair. They weren't fair and just because there was a lot of stuff that the jury never even heard. There was a lot of information that was never allowed to be presented. So it's, for me, that when I look at that, it's not really a fair legal system, but we know that happens all the time.
And I can chime in. I was in court earlier this week testifying. It's weird with jury instructions. I mean, you have things called directive verdicts, which means that the judge can make the decision regardless of the jury presence or not. And then you have jury instructions. So like we had one, this was back in November, where we were testifying, and the jury instructions were, the jury wasn't allowed to consider the roof damage on where the interior leaks came from.
That's happened to me in testimony as well.
And it's so weird because it's like, if you can't consider roof leaks for your interior leaks, and you have to say whether or not the roof leaked to cause interior damage, how do you do that? And it confuses the juries to no end, because they've heard everything.
Yes.
But now they're being specifically asked to disregard
to not
something.
Hear something. Yeah.
Well, no, that's not only, they've already heard it, they've already processed it. They're now being told
disregard it.
Disregard it.
Disregard it. Pretty much like pretend like you didn't hear it.
Pretend you didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Or you can't. No, it's worse than that.
Don't make a decision based on what you heard.
Yes.
Don't make a decision based on this piece of information. You have to make your decision outside of it. And most juries are not like PhD students.
Right.
They're not going to be able to follow that.
No, and they hear you're the expert. when you get on the stand, you're an expert on the stand.
Yep.
And now you're supposed to disregard what the expert said.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about this more when we come back. I'll give out our off-air number, Leo will, and then we will just chat about what's going on, what's happening, and where we think this is going to go. And ultimately, we're going to talk about how this will affect the value in the appraisal. That's why Danielle's here today. So we got a fun show lined up for you. 813-377-2775.
That's 813-377-2775. Text the word aged beauty. I have not forgotten about that. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, bringing you all the, we're going to have a heated show. We've got different political viewpoints talking about a heated topic on price fixing, and we're still trying to get out of Katrina some of the information she doesn't want to say about certain brokerages.
I know. I'm going to have to do a little research on that because I didn't know about that.
Well, you didn't know about the whole price fixing?
Well, the price fixing part, all this I know about. The company she's talking about, I'm not aware of. But
I still think... And I need to wait for her to come back here. The whole real estate commission thing is kind of, you're hiring someone to represent you to get the lowest price possible, who makes a commission based on the highest fee they can get. So it's like, and then the real estate transactions that the buyer's agent is the seller's agent. And I've done real estate transactions with that because the greed factor kicks in. I've gotten probably lower offers accepted by saying, hey, seller's agent, be the buyer's agent, so you don't have to split your commission. It's more attractive to that agent. So from that standpoint, there's a little bit of bias on the agent's side to jack up prices to put more money in their pockets. So I understand some of what, and I know that's not really a popular opinion, but I understand being a buyer, I understand where some of that's coming from.
So I'm going to agree with you because I've seen that happen. Right? In the industry, I have seen that happen. I think there's a lot of good things that are going to come out of this lawsuit. I did want to back up and sort of explain the premise behind it.
Yeah, go for it. Also, I wanted to say real quick before you start that, what happens, because I got back to construction and back to all this and back to 20, 30 years ago, other types of phones, but what do you get when you cross a centipede with a parrot?
oh my gosh, who knows?
You get a walkie-talkie.
A walkie-talkie.
Okay. All right.
That's it. I'm done with dad jokes for the hour.
Commission lawsuit. So, all right. So this whole thing, here's the thing. And what I feel like, listen, in every trade industry, in yours, in any industry period, doctors, lawyers, I don't care what profession it is, you have the 80-20 rule, right? Pareto's principle, where 20% of the agents sell 80% of the homes. I'm in that group. Okay. So what does that mean? You have the other 80% of the agents that might be the onesie twosies, right? They might sell 5 homes in their whole real estate career of 20 years. You don't know.
Yeah, and we used to, for a while, we were sponsoring at GTAR. We were sponsoring their new real estate agents sessions. This is back in 2017, 2018. There'd be like 125, 150 real estate agents in the room. We had to stop doing it because of those 125 to 150. Within 6 months, less than a third of those are still standing. A year in, there might be 5 of the 125 still standing. I mean, It's just so like, it's like, oh, I'm a part-time line chef and I'm a real estate agent. I'm a hairdresser and a real estate agent.
And that's part of the problem, right? Is the barrier to entry is too low, in my opinion. So those of us that do represent this profession as such and treat it as such and treat their clients as such, it gives the rest of us a bad name. Right. And so what Leo is saying, I want to address what you said really quick, and then we're going to come back to the commission lawsuit and you can chime in, Danielle. So what you were saying about, I would go directly to a listing agent and negotiate the commission down, and the seller would basically take a lower offer because of that. There's a lot of agents that do that. I'm not one of those agents. And this is where I think I'm just going to call my profession out on it because people have done it. I don't do it. People do. When I sign a listing agreement with a client, they've agreed to pay me that percentage based on all the things I've said I was going to do. Okay? Period. And they agree me to pay that no matter how that goes down, whether I bring a buyer, another agent brings a buyer, no matter how that happens. And so when I have people that come to me directly and they're like, hey, I want you to take less, or they think they're just going to slice 2 or 3% or whatever off the top because they don't have a buyer's agent, yet they still want the representation of a buyer's agent and they want the advice and the information that an agent would bring to them, I don't do it. The commission has nothing to do with the offer that the buyer will make. And in my opinion, that's where agents as a profession, they screwed up. They didn't treat this as a profession, and it is. And that is true. When you look at it, those are 2 separate contracts. The seller signs a listing agreement with me. That is one contract, period. The contract between the buyer and the seller, completely different contract. They have nothing to do with each other. And then you have another contract in the middle, which is what part of this lawsuit is about. That is like a contract between brokerages and their MLS, which says, I'm going to take a listing. If you help me and you share in on those responsibilities as a buyer's agent, because there's a lot of things that the buyer's agent side does that the listing agent side does not do, then I'm going to pay you part of the commission the seller's agreed to pay me. That's how it works. Yet somehow, like in this lawsuit, and because agents are dumb. I mean, a lot of these guys are dumb. I have to work with them. And they literally have not explained this properly to all parties. They have not explained, hey, the seller has agreed to pay me, and as a broker, I'm sharing my commission with you. The seller is never paying the buyer's agent directly. That never happened.
And you'd be surprised how many buyers and sellers. We have a Ask the Appraiser Facebook group, and we put a poll up there just to see how many people knew where the commissions came from. Nobody knows where the commissions come from.
Right.
That typical buyer has no idea who's paying the agent's commissions in the transaction.
So this is the perfect time to segue back into what this lawsuit is and what the problem is and what they're talking about. So part of the premise in the lawsuit is they argue that basically NAR, the major brokerages, and the MLSs all basically conspired to price fix and unfairly prop up commissions, and basically they were incentivizing or decentivizing agents to show properties. They're saying that basically agents that maybe were only going to get paid a 1% commission or a flat fee or whatever, they wouldn't show their listing because they were going to go show another one that was 3%. Well, here's the thing. And okay, I'm not even going to get into that yet because I'm going to do it in the later part when I piggyback on it. Okay, so there's that. Then they also say that they want part of the settlement is they want them to no longer advertise how much the commission is on MLS. Okay, great. They're going to take that field away. Who cares? And then they're saying that basically the other part, and this is where I think we as an agent profession are going to win with this lawsuit, is they're requiring agents that work with a home buyer to enter into a written agreement. Okay, which we do. So think about this. If you hire me to list your home, do you think I can list it without an agreement? Absolutely not. No. How is it any different from a buyer side? If you hire me to help you find the right home, negotiate on your behalf, and basically lead you and guide you, protect you through this whole part of it, it's no different than retaining an attorney for your best interest, only it's on the real estate side. It's a different license. And you should have a written agreement with that agent to do that. And buyers have always had the choice to not have a buyer's agent. They can go direct. They've always had that choice. Sellers have always had the choice to sell something for sell by owner and not pay an agent. They've always had the choice. And so they're saying by mid-July, the rules are gonna take effect. And then we'll talk about how I think that's going to change. You and I spent a lot of time on that.
A lot of the profession is forgetting in 2006, 7, and 8, this all happened to appraisers. Right. And that's why the entry into our field is so difficult.
Mortgage people, too. They experienced something in between that time.
We didn't get fully sued, I don't think, but it was definitely on the horizon. And then Dodd-Frank kind of came in, and our air rights were made and stuff like that. But we were getting accused of the Federal Trade Commission was down our back for a very long time.
And like with any profession, that happened. Right?
Yes.
There was appraisers that, I mean, we would be lying if we said it didn't, because there was appraisers that pushed the limits. There was brokers that pushed the appraisers to push the limits. And it was unfair. A little, okay, maybe, because there's a little wiggle room in every appraisal.
And I don't believe that the implementation of appraisal management companies fix the problem.
No.
I think the platforms fixed. There are computerized platforms where we never speak to a lender. We never have any verbal communication or text communication. We're sent an order through a blind order system, and we never speak to anyone involved.
Let's back
Those
up.
are the only ones that have protected the
let's
future.
Let's explain that for the person listening, because you're talking about that, but they don't know what happened or what changed. So basically, that change, what Dodd-Frank said, the lenders and the mortgage people are picking the appraiser, they're setting the values, or this and this and this. So then they made that change in the rule to where the lenders can't even communicate.
It's almost like a lottery system now.
So it's a random selection of an appraiser that nobody gets to pick.
No.
So that's the difference.
And appraisers are no longer allowed to advertise their services with lenders. We can't actually solicit. We have to go and apply like we're applying for jobs. We have to go through these 40-page applications, do a background check. I mean, it's costly for us to actually get on an appraisal management company. But it was all about price fixing, and that's why it was done.
Back to this, and we'll chat about it more when we come back. So a lot of the stuff you're seeing and hearing in the mainstream media, I'll just chime on that before we take a break, and then we'll come back to it. They're saying that basically you're no longer going to have to pay a buyer agent commission, right? That's the word on the streets. That's what the mainstream media is saying, is that, your commission just went in half, or it's going to be less. We're going to talk about that when we come back after the break. We're going to talk about what the truth is behind that and where I think the transparency is coming with it. And then I'm actually going to take questions on this because we have listeners, and you're getting a little bit of hate mail, Leo, during the break. We'll talk about that.
I'm getting hate mail?
If you want to call or text some questions, I'll take them. So I'm going to give you our off-air number just to keep it clean, and Adelisa will pass me the message. 813-377-2775. 813-377-2775.
Welcome back. Leo Kane here, Beryl Engineering and Inspection. I've got Katrina all riled up. I've got Danielle trying to calm her down. I'm going to stay out of their way and just let this happen, this rant happen.
So the topic of the show is this recent new, still not yet effective ruling going to affect values? We're going to talk about that. We're definitely going to talk about that. So I think the misnomer in the media is they're saying, for the first time ever, commissions are negotiable. That's false. You've always been able to negotiate your commission. You can hire somebody for a fraction of what I charge. You can.
And you can. You taught me yesterday. You can hire somebody and pay them 10%. It's what you negotiate with the seller.
Danielle was a little surprised because we were talking about on vacant land. I said I charge a higher commission on vacant land, and she's like, why? I said, because you're selling dirt. It's a lot harder to sell. You have to take a different approach. There's different ways you have to sell that. So I mean, it did
open my eyes to why agents are on Facebook asking, well, we should just charge 33% like the attorneys. That it opened my mind to it and made me realize why they're saying.
And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of attorneys in those groups that agents think are just agents, and they honestly need to shut their mouth. But again, it's back to that 80% of the agent bozos out there ruin it for the 20% that are the pros.
Absolutely.
Right? So here's what I think is going to happen. So that what the changes that we're anticipating are commissions no longer advertisable in MLS. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that a seller is no longer ever going to offer a commission that would be enough to also pay a buyer's agent from the listing broker? No.
It basically means that you can only verbally advertise your percentage, correct?
No, they don't. We could put the percentage we're offering to a buyer agent on our website. They just don't want it in MLS.
Appraisers can't.
That's what they're saying. Again, this ruling is still not 100% settled. The DOJ's pushed back on some stuff. It was a little bit premature to talk about it, but all this happened when we were out of town in Europe, and I figured we probably just need to talk about it. So whatever the change is, we're going to roll with it. I'm super excited about the fact that agents have to have a buyer agreement in place to go look at a property, because what that means is you're no longer going to have these Pop-Tart realtors. That's what we call them. And the Pop-Tart realtors are the ones. Well, someone calls and they go, hey, I want to go see 123 Main Street. Can you meet me there in 15 minutes? Sure. They just pop up and stop whatever they're doing and roll out over there. They have no idea if this buyer's qualified. They're running this buyer through a seller's house, and they have no idea if they're there to scope them out and rob them later or whatever. So that's what I mean by it does our profession an injustice. So having this written agreement means they're going to have to verify that the buyer, because it's right on the buyer agency agreement form, the terms of that agreement. How are they going to pay for the house? It's on there. Are they paying cash? Are they looking for a seller-held note? Are they getting traditional financing? If so, how much are they putting down? Do they need closing costs? All those things are spelled out in the buyer agency agreement.
Wouldn't some of that be variable, though? I mean, like, I'm looking at a deal right now where we wanted to do traditional financing, but the numbers didn't work out with the bank, so now we're going to try and see if we can slide into, like, a seller financing note.
So what's your question?
But if that's spelled out in the buyer's agreement, you want to shift and deviate.
It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't. You can renegotiate stuff later.
You would add an addendum, right?
It's not. No, you don't even need an addendum to the buyer agency agreement. It just says, as of starting right now, I'm hiring you to represent me, to help me get through this process of buying this property, handling all the paperwork, making sure title's clear, all that stuff. And in essence, this is how I anticipate to do that. Does it mean it won't change? No, you can change it later. It happens all the time.
Okay.
How many times have you gotten an appraisal request to change the FHA?
Yes, from FHA to
it
conventional.
happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's not an issue with that. I'm so excited about that, because literally that brings the professionalism back up to a higher level. I think it's going to weed out about 50% of the agents. That's what I think. I could be wrong. We'll see. That's my prediction. I'm not wrong a lot on this stuff.
Have you guys hit 7,000 yet? How many agents do you have? It was up to like 6,800 at one point.
I don't know how many is at the board, but it's going to drop. There was a renewal recently for the state, so that dropped some off. And then I would imagine with all this stuff happening, changing in July, and also when the MLS dues come up for renewal, people are going to drop. So let's talk about this from the seller's perspective, shall we? Because I think that's how we have to look at it, from the buyer and the seller's perspective. And then we'll wrap up the hour with how we think that's going to impact values, okay? So from the seller's perspective, you have to think about this. If this goes into effect, and now buyers are responsible for paying their agent if there's no buyer agent compensation available, or they have to pay the difference, or whatever it is. Now, what do you think is going to happen? Let's back up and look at this from a first-time home buyer perspective, and let's talk about who this hurts and how I think this is going to impact different buyers. Okay, so as a seller, I think there's going to be more transparency in the deal. So I think when we go in and we represent a seller, we say, okay, I charge this amount. And in that agreement, it says how much I'm going to pay another agent. But I don't think sellers pay a lot of attention to that. They pay attention to how much is it going to cost me? What's my bottom line, right? And they're still going to do that always and forever going forward. But I think it's going to be really, there's so much in media and news about it, they're going to ask about it, and then we're going to talk about it. And so what I think is going to happen is the very thing they didn't want to happen, right? Where they're talking about steering, how agents would steer buyers away from properties that paid a lower commission. What do you think is going to happen if you're not offering a commission to a buyer's agent, or we aren't offering a commission to a buyer's agent at the seller's request? What do you think is going to happen if you have a first-time home buyer that barely has their cash?
You're either going to get a significantly lower offer or no offer at all.
You're going to get a low offer because someone's going to come direct.
Somebody has to come and pay for that.
Or no offer at all. That's what I think is going to happen. They're going to skip your property, and they're going to go see one where their buyer's agent can get paid and they can get some representation.
I believe it's going to inadvertently cause steering. I think that it's not going to fix the solution. I think it's going to cause the problem.
So I think this opens up a huge problem for the DOJ that they don't yet know exists. I think there is going to be a lot of fair housing violations as a result of this, because I think the lower socioeconomic classes, which are some of the very races they're trying to protect, are going to be the ones that get hurt. When you look at veterans, they're not even allowed to pay commission because it's a non-allowable fee that can be paid by the veteran. So what does that mean? A VA buyer can no longer have any representation, and they're going to have to go hire an attorney. How much do you think that's going to cost them? They're not going to be out on the property showing, they're going to say, you have to figure it out, go look around. What happens if that buyer is working 2 jobs and they don't have the time to look through all the properties and read all the information and see if it has a new roof and if it's in good shape and if they can afford it and run the numbers? They're going to pay an attorney by the hour to do that, because that's what your buyer's agent does.
Well, one of the things I will say, though, and I tell people about this because we're involved in a lot of real estate transactions, is buying a house is a part-time job. So if you are working 2 jobs and you're working 12 hours a day, you don't have the time to properly buy a piece of real estate.
Unless you have the proper agent. I went and saw one house, signed on the dotted line the same day. Decision was made.
I narrowed it down. We knew exactly what we were looking for.
She knew where I was looking. Like, I made one phone call. Katrina, find me a home. I didn't go see. I'm a real estate appraiser. I see the same things that she has. She particularly picked a house for my personality, where I needed to live locationally, and everything else.
Well, I know that you drive all over the place, you have to have close proximity to arteries, and so that's what I looked for.
Exactly, and without that, I would have been in the market looking for a house for 6 months.
It's paralyzing. I've done it for myself. I've looked at properties for myself, and it's paralyzing when you're doing it for yourself. I almost want to have one of my agents help me and say, hey, go find a property.
Especially when there's so many working parts going in different directions as well.
Yeah. So I think, and keep in mind, we report these numbers every single week, right? So we have been in an extreme seller's market for a very long time. We are still in a seller's market. We are barely ticking up towards a balanced market. We're not even there yet.
I haven't clicked stable. Since 2020.
There you go. Out of the mouth of the
appraiser. There are other appraisers that are stating the market is stable. Here in Tampa Bay, if you're marking stable, you might need to go back to school.
So appraisers have to mark a box on the appraisal to talk about the market conditions. And so a seller's market is when you have under a 6-month supply of homes. If you have a 6 to 12 month supply of homes, that's a balanced market. Anything over 12 months is a buyer's market. And we've been in an extreme seller's market for a while. As we flip towards a balanced market,
and we only have 1 quarter dip.
Right.
From September to December of last year, we had a dip from the interest rate and the economy and the inflation. We just had a dip. It didn't decrease.
Right. There's no major anything.
No.
As it takes longer to sell properties, right, and we move into a balanced market, and then, my goodness, if we get back to a buyer's market, which I don't know when or if or how long that would even take, it's going to be a long time, I think, before that happens. Your sellers are going to be begging agents to bring them to their property. They are going to do it, because if you look back to 2008, look at how many properties buyers had to pick from and how many buyers were actually picking homes. There was a lot more sellers than there were buyers. People were unloading properties. So if you think that they're not going to pay a buyer's agent commission, they're definitely going to do it. They definitely are. Things are just going to change. And I think it's going to be for the better. It's going to be more work on the buyer's agent, because now the buyer's agent's going to have to pick up the phone, call that listing broker, see if they're offering a commission, find out how much it is, because they have to now go back to their buyer. Let's use the DOJ's example, which I think was a poor one. They're saying that everybody always charged 6% and the buyer agent always got 3%. Totally not true. But let's say for a minute that is, right? And then let's say the buyer's agent contracts with and this could actually help sellers too. I'll tell you about this. The buyer's agent contracts with their agent to buy a property, and they're saying, okay, I want to make 3%. That's my fee. That's what I charge. And that's how it goes down. Now they go see a property. That seller is paying 2.5% commission. Okay. Now you get another 0.5% that have to be made up in there somewhere. So now the buyer is going to have to make a decision. Do they want to see that property, because they're going to have to pay the 0.5% less? So
could it be a combination thing? Because I would do like an Excel either or scenario. Like it's either 3% or a minimum of X dollars.
Nope.
Here's the thing that's interesting about this lawsuit and what they're saying on the proposed changes. Let's say these buyer's agents out there are saying, okay, I'm going to work for 2.5%. Right? I'm agreeing to take, because we've seen about 2.5% as a buyer agent comp for a while. And that's, about right. So 2.5%, that's what they take. And let's say this seller is offering a 3% or 3.5% or 4%, or let's say they're offering a 3% commission and a bonus if it goes under contract by X amount of time. But this buyer's agent has already signed an agreement that says they're going to be paid 2.5% for their services. Guess what?
They only get the 2.5%.
That's all they're making is 2.5% for their services.
And who keeps the 1.5%?
The buyer is going to get the rest of that if it's being offered as a credit, or it will go away, one of the two. So sellers could actually win from this, or buyers could win from this, but there will be some parties that will affect. So let's talk about how I think this is going to change and how it's going to go down, right? So you have the first-time home buyer, and we're obviously going to get cut off and have to continue after the break, but you have the first-time home buyer that barely has enough money for their down payment and their closing costs. Shoot, a lot of first-time home buyers have to ask for closing costs, right? And Danielle, you're going to be able to chime in on this in the last segment and how this affects the value and all that stuff. So let's say you have a buyer, they just have the down payment. They don't have any more money for closing costs, let alone commission. They're still going to have to contract with a buyer's agent. Now this buyer's agent is going to have to negotiate to make sure that their commission is paid by the seller, or in a closing cost credit is what's going to happen. So right now, the maximum concession, for example, closing cost credit on conventional is 3%. That's the maximum a seller can pay. FHA and VA is 6%. I think that's going to go to 6 and 9% because they may have to factor in a commission. And then VA is going to have to change it to where veterans can pay a commission because that's the way we're going. This is Tampa Home Talk. Stick around. We'll be back. All right, welcome back.
Welcome home.
This is Tampa Home Talk. Welcome home. And our off-air number is 813-377-2775. If you've got some questions, you want to chime in, you want to know more about this, 813-377-2775. So we've been talking about the commission lawsuits with NAR and the DOJ and all the stuff that's going on. And the premise of this show is how might this impact values in the future, right? If a buyer's agent has to pay a commission, is this going to impact the value at all, right? And the truth is, I don't think so. So you're going to have a little bit of wiggle room, and you're going to explain it from an appraiser perspective.
I think this just gets rid of a lot of the agents that shouldn't be agents.
I think so.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, they make more contracts, make better paperwork. I think it trims it, and we're not going to have 150 real estate agents joining the fray every week.
I'm going to sidebar just for 1 second based on what you said. Danielle, you and I were talking about this yesterday with your contract. Yeah. If you remember, we had a little bit of a late snafu with the seller where they were trying to change the terms of the agreement, and I didn't let them do it. And we ultimately, like when we have an agreement we can't get past, we'll push it over to the attorneys to chime in. And so Danielle did that, and you just what did your attorney tell you?
First, the attorney told me the agents got it by just looking at who signed the contract and who was on the contract. And then he was really busy, and he got back to me after I had already agreed to let's just close this thing. And it was a slam dunk. Had I not had the contract written by a professional,
it was tight.
I wouldn't be living in the home right now today. And because of the way the contract was written, I could have taken that to a judge and forced the sale of the home.
So I pushed back. I was strong. I didn't let them trample you. I didn't let them change the terms of the agreement. This is what a strong agent's going to do for you. And sometimes stuff like that does go south. You know?
Does.
A strong agent is going to stand up, and they're going to do whatever it takes. I mean, I've had to call the sheriff on a buyer that was moving in stuff to a property that was not yet funded.
Yes.
And the buyer's agent gave them keys, and they were not supposed to do that.
And the ability that you had to smooth everything over, because I'm living in a home that's financed by the seller, and that could have turned to nightmarish situations.
Yeah, I was just simple and matter of fact about it, and it was.
And when they sought an attorney's advice, they were told the exact same thing: let it go and close, because this contract is solid.
So circling back around to the commissions and how is it going to affect value? So I see this as the onus is going to be on the buyer to pay the comp, right? And the comp is whatever the comp is, and essentially. If the buyer does not have the money, I think it's going to be rolled in as a closing cost credit. So it's going to be a closing cost that the buyer has, And essentially, the seller can still offer that. We can still offer a percentage of the listing broker commission to a buyer's agent to help incentivize a buyer to buy that home. And essentially, they're going to be able to offer, let's go on the side of there's no buyer agent compensation. The listing agent is paying their agent only, and that's it. And so now the buyer's agent has to figure out how to pay their agent, right? And don't think you're just going to go direct to the agent and they're going to do it for free, because that's not going to happen. I'm just telling you, I'm not on my watch. It's too much work. There's too much liability. My E&O insurance wouldn't even cover me because I can't do stuff for free. So it's just not going to happen. Aside from that, let's just say that they have to roll this in as a closing cost credit, which I think is going to happen. So as an appraiser perspective, that does impact the value a little bit.
It could, especially with the no disclosure. Like, we see the sales contracts, but we don't see
only if you're on it.
We don't only if it's the subject property,
Right.
not for the comparable sales.
Thank you.
So when you enter a seller's concession into MLS and say this house got $38,000 in seller concessions, the appraiser is going to start to scratch their head and say, why? What, this should be $5,000, not $38,000.
You see that's why.
And then we're going to take that into consideration and decide. Traditionally, appraisers do not adjust at all for agents' commissions.
I think the Appraisal Institute is going to chime in on that and give you guys some direction on how to handle that.
Yeah, but they're not the end-all, be-all, and they definitely don't steer our profession. And, like, they have steered our profession inappropriately in some cases, so each individual appraiser is going to go with their gut. And if any one entity comes forward and says, do it this way, there isn't an appraiser in this country that's not going to question it.
So let's imagine we're in the market like we were 3 years ago, where everything was selling in 5 minutes.
Yep.
Is the seller going to pay less in a market like that? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But that was already happening because they could list it for sale by owner, and probably they think they're saving commission, but honestly,
statistically,
by putting
we
on the
see
open market, they're going to get more.
We statistically see for sale by owner leave so much equity in the home. The
they lose
appraisers,
money.
the appraisers are astonished, and what it comes down to is for sale by owner doesn't project the future. They look at the right here, right now, where an agent looks at, I'm going to price this for time. Mm-hmm. There's going to be time in the future, and until this goes under appraisal, I'm going to price this accordingly to time. The for sale by owners don't do that, and they leave 15% on the table.
Well, they don't understand that, you have, and again, real estate agents like me, a real estate pro is going to look through a different lens than even an appraiser.
Yes.
Because you're looking at past data, even though a snippet of pending and active, we are going to look a lot more on what is pending and what's our competition.
Absolutely.
Because the goal is to get that under contract, because if we don't make that happen, you never see it, right? So we really have to look at where are we on the market, where are we trending, If you look at these numbers like today, there's 1,012 new listings, and yet 997 went pending and only 667 sold. So, people like me watch these trends. Remember, Leo, we were watching this, and I got lucky when I sold my home almost 3 years ago. The exact day that we saw a blip in the numbers was the day I was closing. You remember that?
July 18th?
Yeah.
No, it was like May.
Yeah.
Okay.
But remember, it's so early. You can't make a projection based on 1 week, right? We watch these.
Well, we saw
week-over-week
there
trends.
was July 18th was an example. We saw the turn. We saw the numbers, and from that point
I can't believe
forward,
he remembers this.
I can't
it
either,
did. So it went
but
down.
Appraisers can pick that day too. A lot of appraisers will say the month, not the specific day. But we saw the downtick, and by September, it was crickets.
What happened is that, the smart buyers that were educated knew that the rates were going to skyrocket. So even though they paid a little bit more or over, in the long haul, if you're financing that property over 30 years, it is not a bad deal, because you look at what you can get now for a rate compared to in the threes, you're never going to see that rate again. And they could rent that property in the future. They've got it made with that interest rate, because you could throw money in a CD for a higher rate than what you're paying on that mortgage. So I hope this talk was valuable to you today. There's so much more we could talk about on the topic, and we could probably spend 3 hours on it. But if you'd like to chat more about it with me, I'm happy to do that. Or if you want to know how it will impact you as a home seller, or maybe your kids are first-time home buyers trying to figure out how to navigate this crazy real estate market we're in, we can help. 813-377-2775. I'm always going to stand for the homeowners and the advocates for buyers and sellers. 813-377-2775. 888-377-2775. Remember, love where you live or we're going to fix it. Welcome home.
Love where you live.